Welcome back, friends, to the Marc Claire Show. With me today, he is the host of the fantastic, if I do say so myself, Counterflow podcast. He is the one and only, as far as I know, Buck Johnson. Buck, welcome to my show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. And that intro, I've told you this, the show is one of my favorite shows. It's one I usually don't miss almost exclusively. But the intro, you and I both like wrestling, and I don't know if you did that on purpose, but the intro is such a WWE theme, like a great one.
It's like it is kind of like my entrance music, what I would come down to the ring to if I were a podcasting wrestler type, combination. Which maybe I'll be someday. I don't know. We'll see where things go, but and maybe we'll talk a little pro wrestling too. We'll see where things go. But first, Buck, we did actually the impetus of this particular podcast. You're going to come on to talk a little bit of Clockwork Orange as I continue my journey. Here's that word. My journey through the films of Stanley Kubrick. But first, it is your first time formally on the show. People have heard your voice before interviewing me on this podcast. But why don't we just get a little background on Buck Johnson? Again, there's a long version of this, but maybe we can do the Cliff Notes version.
Short one. I live in Lockhart, Texas. I am a firefighter in a city that I will not disclose, where I've done that for 25 years. And I'm now an Orthodox Christian. I used to run the Death to Tyrants podcast, and now it's called the Counterflow podcast. And it's gone from, much like Marc's journey, strictly libertarian politics into stuff that's a little bit more widespread and maybe deeper to an extent than that. And a lot of my stuff's often done through an Orthodox Christian lens, and I guess that's the quick, easy version of things.
That was pretty impressive. I got to say that was pretty concise. And I would say your show, especially considering from the time that your show's evolved even since it became Counterflow. But if you go back from the time it was Death to Tyrants to the kind of show you have now, it really is a huge transformation. There we go. I won't use journey this time. It's transformation. So I'm just curious, just from your own perspective, what have you learned the most along this, as your show has transformed? What has transformed the most about you? Obviously, your religion and your adoption of Orthodox Christianity is probably going to be the biggest part of that, but maybe you can expand on that a little bit further and just how it has affected your outlook and your worldview.
Well, that last word is the one I would use, worldview. I was an atheist. I grew up Protestant, and some of the style of church I went to is what I personally would call an atheist factory. I've heard people that grew up culturally Catholic call their churches atheist factories. And for a long time, I thought religion was just a thing you do on Sundays. And I thought, well, it seems silly or maybe a lot of hypocrisy involved in it. And then as things changed over 2020, and I got to talking with some people like Cyprian and Father Turbo, and then dove into Orthodoxy, it hit me like, wait, this is a worldview. It's not just I believe in this thing, and so I live my life and try to be a good person. Like, it kind of connects all of the dots. So I think my outlook and my worldview has been the thing that has changed the most because of Orthodoxy.
By that, do you mean instead of perhaps before when you were just attending church nominally or whatever, what have you, it was something you did within your life and then you sort of clocked out on the way out and went back to the rest of your life. But now it's not like going to church is an aspect of your life. Since it is your worldview, as you say, it's the entirety of your life.
Yeah.
In a sense.
In a sense, that's right. And people say to me sometimes, you don't have a libertarian show, but what's your political views, or what's your political party, or where do you sit on the political sphere? And it's instinctive now. My answer is, well, I'm Orthodox Christian. And so when growing up in Protestant churches, you would still hear, vote for the Republicans, and we're Republicans, we're pro-life, and the other people that aren't Christian are Democrats. And it's such a strange, like, that wouldn't even make any sense to me right now to say something like that. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can find Orthodox people and you could, well, who did you vote for? And that's the thing. But it's not, I don't look at things through just kind of surface level politics anymore. It all goes deeper. And so it's kind of what maybe you and I thought about libertarianism, where we're like, well, we're not left nor right. We're a little deeper than that. And it turns out, no offense to anyone, of course, but that's still not very deep. when it comes down to it.
Well, it's easy to get into a point where you feel like a rejection of something or a rejection of a paradigm is actually some kind of enlightened viewpoint,
Yes.
when it really is childish, when it's not accompanied with actually a thoughtful, well, like, I guess a worldview and a replacement for that, and a positive description of how things should be. And I think, and of course, as we both know, a lot of libertarians do have positive visions of how things should be and whatnot, but a lot of people, including former versions of us, can easily get into that other trap where they're simply reacting and rejecting, and a rejection of something becomes their worldview, which isn't really a worldview. It does leave a void there, and as we've seen, that void can be filled by all sorts of things.
Yes, it can. The talk that's coming out on my next episode, we talk exactly about that, because the void. I don't want to get too deep, but the cosmology that how humanity started was there was a void there on purpose to be filled by Christ. And so if you're not, there's still a void there. So you got to figure out something. And that's why I do like libertarians like Dave Smith. I thought your last episode with him was terrific, because he's not just, I'm anti-state, I'm against the state. He still fills his thought process with what I'm for. And I think that's a more positive way to do it. And Father Turbo, who I know you've had on too, one way that he said it was fascinating to me. Too many people are worried about the horizontal view of life and how you approach humans, left, right, etc. But it's a cross, and you also have to do the up and down view towards Christ or towards, the demons, if you will. And so I think that full cross, like view, and then another way to, if it's the Trinity, everything in American politics is binary, and it shows a lack of understanding of the Trinity, because the Trinity is not binary. It's three. You had a tweet today that actually reminded me of that, about the neocons want Israel, the woke people want, I believe it was Palestine. And that's such a binary, and it's such a classic American binary, when in reality, those people, both of those particular sides want, in a way, the same negative energy, and neither one of them are looking upward.
Right. Well, I think this, in a way, that will dovetail actually into the conversation that unfolds from discussing this film. So why don't we dig right into it? And first, when I reach out to you about this, because I'm reaching out to a number of different people about doing shows on Kubrick's film. I did the first one, 2001, Space Odyssey, with Jay Dyer. And I reached out to you and I said, hey, by chance, I didn't really know if you were into Kubrick films at all, but you said you absolutely are. And not only that, but that this film was actually your favorite. I don't know if you said your favorite movie overall, but you definitely said your favorite Kubrick film. So why don't you just give me a little background on your interest in Kubrick overall and this film specifically?
Yeah, I do like him. I am not my people that listen to your show will get a kick that I'm doing a movie episode with you, because I'm not a movie person, and this is my first movie episode with anyone. But I have liked Kubrick films. In fact, I went when I was in LA one time on vacation. He had a whole display at one of the museums there in Los Angeles, and I'm not a big museum guy either. And I immediately saw that. I was like, we are going to this. Kubrick stuff's there. I do gravitate towards the Clockwork Orange stuff, but there's some of his other films I like as well. Part of the interest that sparked for me with Clockwork Orange, I don't know if you know this, Mark, but it is big. It's huge within the skinhead culture.
I did not know that, but I could see that, I guess, now when you say it.
That is the culture I grew up in a little bit in my teenage years. And for people listening, Mark covered this with Father Turbo. Skinhead culture does not mean that you're Nazis or
it's
white
good
power.
To point that out, because that is the first thing that would normally come. If I first heard it from you, it might be what I thought, but I heard it from Father Turbo, so I knew that probably wasn't.
Yes, that he's black. Largely, it's not a racial movement at all. A very small percentage of it is, and guess which percentage of the skinhead movement the media likes to get into? Of course,
probably the 0.01% that are the racists. Right. I'm going to guess.
And so it is. In fact, this is an old skinhead band, and as you can see, this shirt I wore it on purpose. Is themed after the Clockwork Orange caricatures, and there's a band called the Foreskins that sang about it. The Addicts sang about it. The band called Cockspar has a song called Droogs Don't Run. And so it was widespread when I was growing up in that culture. I saw it constantly. Of course, we only thought, I was too young to appreciate some of the nuance and some of the messaging in it. We all liked the fight scenes and the kind of ultra violence, as they call it. They were wearing, skinhead boots quite often in the movie. And host and humble narrator, which is my tagline for my own show. I stole it from this movie.
Now that I put that all together, that makes perfect sense. Because he uses that phrase quite often throughout the film. It is really from a first-person perspective of the lead character, Alex, played by Malcolm McDowell. I always accidentally call him Roddy McDowell because there's two of these guys, and he's not Roddy, but he is Malcolm McDowell.
Yes, yep.
It's a hell of a cool. So we'll dig right into the movie, and I'm gonna kind of go through it, sort of by scene-ish, but we'll just kind of discuss the points that either of us find most important. So feel free to interrupt me anytime along the way if there's something that you want to dig into. But we start off as pretty much as all Stanley Kubrick films do in some way, shape, or form. It's usually just hitting you audibly. He hits you with this music. And as we get into the film, we do find that Alex is a pretty interesting character. Of course, as we see, he is filled with violence and rage and gets a joy out of just torturing and tormenting people. But he also has a certain intellect about him because he is a big fan of Ludwig van, as he calls him, of Beethoven. So before I even go scene by scene, I mean, we see Alex right in the beginning, right in that first shot, zooming out of his eyes and the look on his face as he's drinking the milk, which we later find is called Milk Plus, that they drink at the Korova bar. And so what is your first impressions of this character visually and from as you've described his use of the narration tool as the humble narrator?
Well, it stuck with me, so it clearly was an impact. I think it's wonderful. I thought his look, again, coming up in the culture I was in at the time, was just rad. That's how I would have put it back then. Kind of menacing, but a slight bit of artistic quality to it, which in a way, although skinheads didn't dress like these guys do in the movie, there was like a weird twist of style to the look, but at the same time, it was menacing and a little bit threatening to people. And then the milk bar still fascinates me. In fact, there's a punk bar, I think it's still open in San Antonio, called the Korova Milk Bar, obviously taken from this, which also shows you how big that culture is into this stuff. And then I also didn't find out till my adult years, after researching it, what's in the milk. Do you know what the milk, he calls it Moloko. Do you know what's supposed to be in there?
I don't know exactly what's supposed to be in there. No, but tell me.
It's like barbiturates as far as my research goes. And then
where do you find out what's actually in it? Because they don't talk about it in the movie.
I can't remember. I've done just a lot of research on this over the years.
Okay, fair enough. I'll accept that.
Yeah, and adrenochrome, which I
interesting.
find fascinating. I didn't think that was a thing in 1971, I think is when this film was made. Of course, the book was written prior to that, but adrenochrome, which is talked about within conspiracy circles all the time now.
I thought it was interesting too that Alex refers to it as Milk Plus, and this is how it sort of appeared visually in my mind when he said milk, and very shortly after that said ultraviolence and used the phrase ultraviolence several times. I was picturing milk, ultraviolence, MK Ultra. That's the image that sort of popped up in my mind that definitely wouldn't have 20 years ago. But
wow,
that kind of struck out to me. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be referencing. Of course, later aspects of the movie certainly are referencing that sort of brainwashing type stuff. But if you take the milk as perhaps, I thought you could also take the milk as sort of part of potentially a government program of this is the kind of stuff they're putting out to. As we know, you did a show not long ago with Jay Dyer talking about the 60s counterculture. And as we know, a lot of that love of psychedelics and drugs and all of that stuff did not spring up naturally. It was it was sort of a concerted movement from the elites of the time. So I'm curious if that's sort of a sly reference into the milk being something along those lines as well.
That's good. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but considering what it does to them and where it leads Alex, that's certainly a possibility. That's a good pickup, Mark.
Well, thank you. That's why I'm here. We are the experts. I was playing us down like we're not these esoteric movie analysis guys, but we're gonna show people a thing or two today. I also thought a lot of things struck with me throughout this film of just the sort of a lot of the visual representations of various objects and artwork in the movie that really tell you a lot about the society. We first see this in the Korova bar where they're sitting on these with this furniture that's like made of people. It's unclear if even sometimes if they're porcelain people or like maybe actually real people in some cases. And it's just one of these things that felt, I think the phrase that I think of a lot now that I wouldn't have thought, 20 years ago watching this, it feels very satanic. A lot of it, a lot of the imagery. A lot of it felt very akin to a lot of the imagery in a lot of Kubrick's other films as well. So it seems he's very immersed in a lot of that type of imagery that I think that the elite likes to use and the elites have in their home, which we'll see kind of later in the film as he encounters some of these elites.
And the juxtaposition of some of the crazy satanic aspects of the art and I still find parts of that inside the milk bar beautiful. And then the outside of how England was at that time is so depressing and drab. And like, we'll get into maybe what his parents looked like and how kind of strange they were. But the stuff he was into was, this artistic stuff, and his everything was a little bit brighter and more. Then we go to that lady's apartment, and it's the juxtaposition between the drab, ugly England mixed with this like flashy whites and oranges and reds, kind of beautiful aspect of some of it. It's interesting.
Yeah, Kubrick's use of colors always strikes me in his works, but it's not just the colors; it's how they contrast with what you're seeing elsewhere in the film. And I think, like you said, when he's with the scene that comes up next, where Alex and his droogs, as he calls them, his homies in his little sort of degenerate army that just goes around and fucking with people, raping, pillaging, and basically just being menaces to society. And they come upon this homeless guy. And they start fucking with him, and this guy's just saying like, "Just kill me! Like I don't care. This world's horrible." And he goes on this rant about what is this? It's a stinking world, and he lists like 5 or 6 different reasons it's a stinking world. But they don't do him the favor. They don't kill him. They just beat the living shit out of him and move on. And as we see these various acts of violence, one thing that Kubrick always puts in there is the juxtaposition with the classical type music that always plays throughout. What do you just think of the overall in this scene, but also throughout the film, of how Kubrick uses that classical music? Specifically, Beethoven's Ninth is the big one that becomes directly associated with Alex, of how he does that throughout the film.
I think it's the same juxtaposition of the drab England versus the beauty and the art. And because if this movie was made by someone else, specifically, I would say in the 80s, that scene would have had some sort of punk rock playing behind it, and it would have been more stereotypical and made people just kind of think, this, in a more regular way, if you will, a normie way. But this weird that he likes like some of the most beautiful music of all time, as he wants to rape, pillage, beat up people. Again, I keep saying juxtaposition, but it's wonderful.
It's our new journey.
Yes, it is. And it turns out, I think, I don't want to spoil anything, they probably should have killed that guy or maybe not done anything to him at all. Because if I remember correctly, I think he reappears. And I will say the scene with them, the side scene where they're first facing the homeless man under that bridge or whatever it is also a classic scene for the people that love this movie. I believe that's there's t-shirts made of just that shot.
Yeah, there are many classic scenes in this film. And yeah, from the homeless guy, they also come upon this other group of other droogs, I guess.
Yes.
Which yes. I thought the scene was kind of, it's kind of, I mean, it's not a funny subject matter, but the way that they carry this scene out, I mean, it's almost like a scene from like, you've seen The Warriors. It almost felt like a slapsticky version of The Warriors, the way this whole fight scene plays out, and the way that Alex's set of droogs shows up and interrupt these other droogs they're ostensibly raping this woman, which of course is a horrifying thing. But it just struck me as so odd the way that this scene was shot, because it almost felt like this is gonna be on t-shirts. It felt like a slapstick rape. It didn't feel like they were trying to. I think that's a good thing. I didn't feel like they were actually trying to rape her. It felt like they were just haphazardly sort of pulling this woman around as it set up the fight between the two groups of droogs, which also felt like a very sort of slapsticky fight. I think of all the scenes in the film, this is the one that stood out to me as the one I would just say kind of felt strange to me, to be honest, because it didn't seem to have the same ultra violent violence as a lot of the other scenes where the victims were clearly sympathetic in the time, whether it's the homeless man or, the older people we'll see later on. It seemed a little out of place to me, to be honest, this one scene, but I'm curious if you have some deeper thoughts on it.
It made it look like Alex and his droogs, his gang.
They're the top dogs, I guess. Yeah.
They're the good guys in a way, because these other guys look worse, I would say, and not as cool, to be quite honest. And there's gratuitous nudity here, and they're ripping this girl's clothes off. The girl's attractive, of course, and it makes you think like, oh gosh, I hope they don't do this.
And this is before we've seen later violence from at this point we'd only seen them kind of rough up the homeless guy. Yeah. So perhaps they are still building up a more straightforward storyline of, look, yeah, these are bad guys, but these are the better bad guys. So maybe that is the purpose.
Yep, like a dark comic character or something, that maybe you shouldn't go pick on a homeless man. But look, this other gang's raping this pretty girl, ripping her clothes off. She's distraught. And they go, and in this, it's almost like the old Batman. Like it almost should have had a pow, bam kind of scenario. They're beating up the worst guys, if you will.
Right. Today's episode of the Marc Clair Show is sponsored by, right here, Fox & Sons, foxandsons.com, my favorite coffee brand. And I don't just say that because they're sponsors of the show. I say that because I get a 1 pound bag shipped to my house. The proof is right here. Every single month, I get my pound of Fox & Sons delivered right to my house. You should too. Of course, I don't expect you to just dive right in with no idea what you're getting into. I want you to go get yourself a sample bag. Go over to foxandsons.com, foxnsons.com. You can check out the Den Blend Dark, as is my preference, the Tanzanian Peaberry, Brazilian Honey Premp, a bunch of other flavors still to come. Steven's always mixing it up with new, fresh beans. The best part about this business, Steven started it to not only relive his love for sharing coffee with his father, but to teach his own sons about entrepreneurship. If that doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies, I don't know what will. Just kidding. Yes, I do. This coffee will. So head over to foxandsons.com, foxnsons.com. Use discount code MCS to get yourself 18% off your order. You're going to be coming back for more. Trust me. foxandsons.com, discount code MCS. Back to the show. Well, they have that scene, and they then move on to this is one of the other scenes in the film. This is probably the only visual effect in the whole film that just didn't feel Kubrick-esque, is the scene when they're driving in the car and the green screen. It was the only scene that took me out of it a little bit, that didn't feel as masterful as most of Stanley Kubrick's work. But I'll give him a pass. It's a fast driving car.
The kitschy reason of it, just again. Part was cartoon comic book to me,
for sure,
in their Durango 95.
And maybe there is a little bit of a purposeful effect, because we know full well from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which came out well before this movie, that he's capable of different kinds of effects. So it has to be somewhat purposeful to make it just a little bit kitschy here. Yes,
I maybe because I'm such a nerd about this movie, but I thought that was one of my favorite scenes as they did that. And again, it shows, I believe it's showing his one eye with the fake eyelashes, looking menacing, and they're just goofing around. And I love that part. And is this, I think, now when they go to the rich couple's house?
Yes.
After this?
Yes. Okay. This is when, right? Well, first they play, what do they call the game on the road? They call it Hog in the Road, which is when they just drive all over the road and fuck with people. And I think the progression does go that we see them be worse and worse as things go on. Like in the beginning, you might even be able to tell yourselves that he's not that bad, like when they interrupt the rape or what have you. But then they're just kind of fucking with people on the road. And then they decide it's time to play a game they call Surprise Visit. So do you want to describe this scene to this mansion that they come upon?
This is when you realize maybe they're not the best gang of all. And it's funny because I was talking to my girlfriend, Julie. She had seen part of this movie, and she's got a little bit more sensitivity in her sweet female nature.
This film should come with warnings for those that are sensitive to ultraviolence, I guess you could say.
Yep, there you go. And she said, I think I stopped watching it because there was like pretty horrific rape scene. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Because I hadn't seen it in years. I go to watch it for this episode, and I texted her and I said, yeah, I better skip this one. Because of the scene we're about to get into, where it's this clearly a nice rich couple. I believe the guy looks like he's a professor of some sort, and he's got a wife that's much prettier than he would typically deserve.
Probably
And,
about a solid couple decades his younger, I would say. He's doing well, this guy.
He looks like an old British intellectual that would be at some old university there. And she's like his hot little trophy wife. I believe she's wearing like a singlet, a one piece all the way, bright red, if I remember correctly. I can't remember the color, but
I believe it's red or purple. I literally watched this again 2 hours ago, so it should be fresh. But
yeah, and they basically rip her one piece outfit off. And I don't think, again, now it's been like a month and a half since I've seen this, but I don't believe it shows anything explicit. But
it doesn't, but it's almost worse than if it, I don't know if it's worse than if it did, but it's so implied that you know exactly what he's about to do. I'm to the point that he actually takes his pants off. And I mean, I didn't do this, but you could probably freeze frame and see his actual stuff if you wanted. I mean, it seems genuine what was happening. And they do kind of cut away before it actually happens. But as was definitely confirmed later on, a violent rape certainly did occur.
So you did not pause it. Well, that makes me feel weird. No, I'm joking.
I was going to do that after the fact. I just didn't have time today.
And
that's for the smoke-filled room, my friends.
There you go. There also, if I remember correctly, they hold the man down. They basically make him watch?
Both of them, they put these like ball gags in their mouth and tape them closed so they can't scream or anything. And then the man, he's kicking on the ground while singing in the rain, and then slapping he's alternating between slapping the woman and kicking the man in the gut as he's singing in the rain. And then he basically just is pretty much just saying what he's going to do to her as he slices open the parts of her singlet, exposing her breasts and then exposing her vaginal area, and then takes his pants off. And it's very clear. I almost, when I was rewatching this, I was like, I don't even remember how much worse does this get. I mean, I almost was getting nervous, but they do actually, they don't show it, but it's as bad as if they do, really. I mean, it's as disturbing as if they really showed more than they did.
Yeah, it definitely concluded in my mind, okay, my girlfriend should not watch this, because she would see that part and go, Buck, you said this was not that big of a deal. This is awful. Because it is, frankly, quite disturbing. And again, a little foreshadowing. It comes around again. We'll put it that way.
Yes, as do many things. And these boys, this is all in one night out in the town, a school night, by the way, as we'll see. They go back to the Korova for a nightcap. And this is where we start to see a little dissension among the droogs, among Alex and his droogs. There's this like lady singing. We can come back to this later, but I thought the lady singing appeared later in the film, but I'm not sure if that was true or not. But he seemed fascinated with this one lady that was singing, and then one of his droogs, I think Dim, makes a comment. Alex just slaps him, and then you can tell that Dim kind of wants to go back at him, but he basically just gets shot down, and you can tell there's a lot of dissension in the group. They event, but and in between this, Alex goes back to his home, and we see his house, and this might be something that might have struck you differently than it would have, even just a few years ago. What did you think about Alex's room? Not just his artwork, which is certainly along the lines of the artwork we see in pretty much every house we see in this film, very sexual and whatnot. But he also has a pet. Buck, what do you think of his pet?
Well, at the time when I was younger, I would have liked it because I had one too.
Did you?
Yeah, he had a snake. There's the phallic symbolism, of course. I believe he put it into a naked woman. Is that where it was stored?
Yeah, it was living in his drawer, but yeah, when he takes it out and puts it above his bed, it sits on this thing where it's basically it's going into like, it's basically going into the vagina of like a naked woman that's painted above it. So that has some obvious, and this is all above all these Christ statue figures right below it. So that, I didn't even notice that stuff, back 20 years ago when I watched this movie. But that, of course, I figured would stand out to you quite a bit as well.
It did. It kind of hurt to see it. I was like, oh my, I never noticed that before, but they were basically like naked figurines of Christ, which is kind of crazy. I guess I could see today those being made somewhere at some kind of twisted festival, a pagan festival or something, but it's crazy to think, I mean, maybe they were just made for the movie, but if that was at some store in 1971, I think it'd be horrific.
I feel like they probably were made for the movie, but I'm not sure. Because this is, I mean, it's weird because they never are clear about the setting of this movie, because in many ways it feels like 1970s England, but it also feels like the future as well. There's some aspects that make it futuristic. So it's not clear if it's supposed to be like something that could have existed then or not. But I do feel like either way, it was a lot of this imagery and a lot of that stuff is placed there really, I think, by Stanley Kubrick just to really continue to show us the state of this society. Because what Alex has is, it's pretty scandalous, I guess you could say, the artwork that's in the house and the snake and whatnot, but it's not all that different than the same stuff as we'll see later in the film that we see in the houses of the victims, that we see in the houses of pretty much everybody. Right. Everyone has this sexual sort of art everywhere. So I think he's really showing you this is the state of society. Alex is a part of society. And I think as things go on, especially using the choice to keep him as the humble narrator the whole time, even though he's doing horrible things, and even though in no way is he portrayed as a heroic figure, even in one iota in this film, I do feel like there is the techniques that Kubrick uses does make you sort of sympathetic to Alex along the way, as hard as that is to believe, but that he does find unique ways to continue to do that throughout the film.
And up until he gets out of the program that we'll discuss that he goes into, I do think his parents were made to look almost like the total squares of the movie.
Yes.
And then it's like everything quote unquote fun looking to the, no pun intended, naked eye is like degenerate stuff. Even I think the symbolism of the snake, but just the wild fun that they have, the unique bar they go to, the crazy sex things they do, the rowdy fights, like to a young degenerate, this looks like, well, that's the fun life. And then you see his parents in this small flat, and it seems their life's depressing. Now, again, later it looks like his mom has some sort of sex toy that replaces Alex in a sense to living there. But yeah, up until this, it looks like all the fun, if you will, and I don't mean that to me personally, but it's the degenerate nature of what's going on, and everything's kind of collapsed and it's just gross, except for this beautiful milk bar and then this wild fun, this rad Durango 95 they get to cruise in, etc.
Do you think this is part of why this film resonates with the sort of punk rock or skinhead scene, just because of that it displays the juxtaposition between the boring, systemic, societal regime, the systems, the man, if you will, versus the wilder and crazier side, which does include fighting, darkness, things of that nature.
Drinking, not adrenochrome and barbiturate laced milk, but it would have been not artistic and not as unique, I think, to just put beer in there.
Mm-hmm. He also gets a visit, or no, this is the next day. Alex decides to. I love this. I love this whole scene because we have a teenager at home, so we've seen this kind of thing. But it's pretty funny his logic here. His mom wants Alex to get up and go to bed, and Alex says, no, I'm sick. I'm not well. I gotta rest, Mom. And she's like, well, you're sick. You're gonna miss school. And he says, well, I've got to rest, Mom. Got to get fit, or else I'm liable to miss more school. Yes. that just cracked me up because it's such teenager logic, but Alex uses it quite effectively. And this is where you realize, it's not clear how old he is necessarily, because he seems like a young adult in the beginning. They're going to a bar and whatnot, but he's got to get up and go to school in the morning. So I don't know if he's supposed to be a teenager or this is just a weirder, more modern futuristic society where maybe, all these lines are a little blurred. So maybe it doesn't matter how old he is exactly.
That line was blurred. In fact, I remember the first time I saw it and I was like, school? Like, what is that?
I just realized this whole time I'm drinking a protein shake. I'm basically drinking milk as well during this.
Is there adrenochrome in there, Mark?
I cannot comment.
There you go. I have in my notes, this prime minister. Wait, hold on. No.
The prime minister's later.
That's later. The record store. Is that where we're at?
You can take off into the record store. We're about there. Yeah, he's gonna go on a little solo adventure. And Alex, as we'll see, Alex has got game.
He does. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember this part of the It's funny because there is that aspect of the record store, but in my notes and in my mind, I first remember it's so futuristic looking. I'm a record lover, and it just blew me away. I thought, what a cool store. Why can't there be any stores just like this? And then, of course, there's the 2001 Space Odyssey record, like you can see clearly in one of the bins right up front.
I didn't catch that.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's in there. And it's, of course, he meets these, I believe it's two young ladies.
It appears
See,
to
it's
be.
funny. I in my notes, I put how cool the record store looked and that one record was in there. I didn't even write the fact that I believe now is where he goes and has a threesome with these two.
And this shows where we're at, because my notes just say Alex goes to the record store and lands a threesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, that's why we need both of us, so we can make sure we cover everything. Yeah.
Correct. And to your point, they were quite attractive ladies. And then it goes to this scene of the actual threesome again, which I would have, had there not been the rape scene earlier, texted Julie and go, yeah, you wouldn't like this part either. But it's really fast and it's almost done in a kitschy way.
It is like it's almost like a Benny Hill.
Yes.
Is it the Benny? It's almost like you picture it with the Benny Hill music, how they kind of speed it up.
Yes, or the like,
right,
or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just some circus tune or something but he's clearly having a wonderful time. I maybe that Korova milk, the Moloko Plus, gives you some extra oomph or something because it,
or he's just young Buck,
but not young Buck.
No, but not young Buck. We did skip one scene. I just realized, and I want to go back to it just because there's an important line in it where this like the guy from the corrective school comes to check up on Alex because he knows he hasn't been in school.
Yeah,
and it's really creepy because first of all, Alex is in his underwear and he sits down on the bed with him and like lays back with him, and it's a very, very creepy scene, especially because we still are not clear if this is a teenager or a young man or what. I think either way, I think between the milk and the way he lives with his parents, he's clearly not like 14. He's an older young man, if nothing else. I think they are really showing us the infantile nature of his generation as well, which is, again, back to the juxtaposition, very juxtaposed with what that same infantile generation goes out and does at night.
Yes, and then the quote unquote this representation of the man comes over. I'm surprised I didn't write that down. That's actually why I was trying to think. I knew this was around that scene.
Well, when he's berating him too, the guy says, well, the key line here is he says, "What's wrong with you? Is it some devil that crawls inside of you?"
Yes. And then Alex is in his underwear, which I guess during this supposed time, the fashionable ones for young men to wear were tidy whities.
They were fashionable when I was a kid in the 80s too,
There you go. This old man.
Well, at least that's what my parents bought me. I don't know if they're fashionable.
This old man's representing the authorities, if you will. And Alex ends up laying down on a bed with his feet hanging off the bed. And this man is clearly gay and wants to molest Alex. And it gets creepy for a second where he puts his hand on his junk, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then something breaks it up or it stops.
Alex just jumps up and like grabs his junk and was like freaked out by it, actually.
Yeah.
Which does, I think, add to the sympathy for Alex. Because look, if this creeper old guy is trying to touch him, who knows what else the system has done to him to make him what he is now. Correct.
Right. Is he a product of some sort of like systematic abuse by authorities or whatnot? Did he know that guy well? Was he expecting this? I suspect you wouldn't want to just be in your underwear, but whatever. That was more disturbing. Maybe just because I'm a man, that was more disturbing than the other scenes in it up to this point.
Yeah. It's the only one where Alex actually felt, I mean, until later on, but where when he's still in this sort of phase one of his character, where Alex felt like the victim there. It felt like, whoa, what are you doing to this kid? Even though we just saw this kid, raping people last night.
Right. And then it makes up for it when he, again, goes to the record store and meets these lovely young ladies. And then
his day worked out okay.
It ended up fine.
And then later, Alex, after the whole record store scene, Alex goes and meets up with the Droogs, and they have a little talk with Alex. Dim says, like, no, you're not going to like talk to me like that anymore. And the other Droog is like, no, this is the new way. We're going to do things different. We had a whole talk about this. We're going to go after, because Alex's thing, like, they're not like robbing people and taking a bunch of money and like making bank and sharing all this money. They're just doing this stuff because Alex is violent and he likes to do this stuff and he likes to fuck with people. Like, this is not really a profitable venture for these guys. So they're saying, like, look, we're going to go for some bigger jobs, the big money. We got to do the big money and we're going to split everything evenly and we're going to be a team. And Alex is just kind of like, All right, I guess you guys talked about this. Okay, but then shortly thereafter, he attacks both these two droogs. There's the one that gets left alone because he's kind of not one of the ones rebelling. He's just kind of there, and he slices both of their wrists. And as we learn through the narration, he was very careful to carefully slice them in a way that wouldn't permanently kill them. But it certainly does enough to scare them back into being his underlings. So we do really alternate between seeing so many different sides of Alex. We see the Alex who is a rapist. We see the Alex who is a victim of child molestation, perhaps. We see the Alex who is a smooth talker who can just whip himself into a threesome at the record store just like that. And then we see the Alex who's acting more like a mob boss here, like getting his people in line, making people fall in underneath him. So, and this is all in the first like 20 minutes or so of the movie. So we've seen like a full range of the different aspects of Alex's character here.
And part of maybe this was because I grew up in that subculture scene. There's some tension between the droogs and Alex, and there is tension within me watching it there every single time. There still is, to where I think, what makes the head of the gang the head of the gang? Is it just some unspoken thing? Is he voted on? Is he jumped to a certain thing? There's all sorts of gangs throughout subcultures and throughout history, but you see quickly it's like he thinks he's the head just for these little acts of violence. We find out that they're going to turn on him, and it's almost like, I think of it in wrestling terms too. When you see these factions, it's like,
right.
Why is that guy? Why is Hulk Hogan the head of the NWO? And does he when will he turn on him? And just things of that nature. Why was Edge the head of the last thing he was
Judgment
in
Day? Yeah,
Judgment Day, and then of course they turn on him. There's always this tension throughout storylines and in real life in my past. It's like, what makes this guy the head? And I've always found that fascinating.
Does that translate to you just coming from that punk skinhead culture? Because I mean, I know there is like you said, fighting, violence is sort of like, even when it's amongst friends, is sort of part of the culture. So is there something in like the friend group circles even? Is there that dynamic there where you're like, at any moment that we know this one guy could just like crack me because I kind of stepped out of line?
I guess so. There was two rival skinhead gangs in San Antonio. Neither one of them white power, for those who are wondering about that kind of thing, which made it even more weird. But they clearly had leaders, and I never thought at the time, like, or maybe I thought, but I never knew the answer. That's a better way to put it. What made this person the leader of this group? What made that? I just knew they were. Right. And it's always been fascinating to me how that kind of comes about, if it's organic or if it's through violence or what.
I wonder if it's just like the micro, because I always wonder this thing when I'm watching mafia movies or this kind of thing, and there's like always the one guy that, he's always the one that can have the three guys loyal to him, go cap the other guys. And it's always, I've always thought that, like, what is special about that guy? Like, what makes it where that guy can persuade people? Because at the end of the day, he's just a guy like anybody else, whether it's the mob boss or whether it's Alex or whether it's a president or a dictator. I mean, that one guy, it takes two guys to physically take that guy out. So what is it that creates that aura of a guy? And I wonder if this is just, maybe it's just one of those mysteries of the universe, but it's something coming from the political circle that was talked about a lot, in the last couple of years. Elite theory, the Pareto principle, that there's always that small, very, very small percentage of the population that, for whatever reason, that maybe we can't fully grasp, that there are certain people that are simply born as the elites in their club. And maybe on the small level, we see that even within these little Drew groups or whatnot, or punk rock skinhead groups.
Exactly. Even within subculture gangs, there's a natural hierarchy that there's no equality even at that level.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, so this is where he, like I said, he's kind of like asserts his dominance. And then I love how they're at lunch or whatever afterwards. And he's just like, all right, so back to normal, right? Back to the way things were. It does, at least for the moment, seem like they've kind of fallen back in line. But now, it's time to go back out and go do droog things. So Alex, they go into this other mansion, up to this mansion where Alex rings the doorbell, and he did this earlier with that first guy, and he kind of said, I forget exactly what he said, but he said like, "Oh, we're stranded out here, like we need help." And the lady calls the cops because she recognized that description of what Alex was saying at the door. She recognized that from the story about the other couple that was killed. So Alex he tries to get in by using this, by trying to convince her. It doesn't work. And while he's doing that, he decides to sneak in. But we notice when he actually enters the house and enters the room and goes to assault this woman, the rest of the gang is not with him. It's just Alex there. And again, in this elite woman's house, who is clearly, one of the wealthy people in society, one of the well-to-do people, what does she have all over her wall? She has all these sexual paintings, and then she has this is the scene. For you, it was the other scene. For me, this is the scene. My wife was like, just make sure I don't come in the scene during in the room during this scene. This is the scene where she has this giant, basically penis sculpture, which at first Alex just goes to touch, and she's like, do not touch that. That is a very, very important sculpture, which I thought was pretty funny. And then he goes to attack her. She gets a shot in on him, a pretty good shot in him, but that was not a smart move, because now Alex just goes nuts. He loses it on her, and he then basically, you don't see her face smashing, but you do see the aftermath, and it's clear that he murders her with a giant penis sculpture.
Giant ceramic penis.
Which, there's layers. I'm sure, some people might watch this of a certain political bent and see this as the domination of the patriarchy over females or something like that. But there's certainly messaging there of some sort, no matter what your take on it is.
And wasn't she fighting him with a bust of Beethoven?
Yes, that is a good catch. Yep.
Yeah, but who of course is his hero.
Well, that's probably what pissed him off even more.
It's almost like, just for the men out there, think of a crude term that can be done in a sexual act. I'm not going to say it, but it's the great penis trying to go into the bust of Beethoven. It's going back and forth, I remember there's this funny music playing.
Yeah.
Where again, it makes it slightly kitschy, but at the same time,
I think this is where you get the dun 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 dun.
In this, it's very clear that he murders her, unfortunately. And again, he goes into this house, the juxtaposition against the ugly, drab, let's say it's England for the sake of conversation. And
it appears to be
art and pretty things. Again, a little bit vulgar, but even just the fact that she had this giant ceramic penis, she's clearly better off, at least financially, it would seem, than other people around her.
Indeed. And Alex, actually, I think this is the first time he actually looks a little bit horrified for a moment himself too. It almost looks like he was like, whoa, no, like I'm a rapist and a pillager and whatnot, but I don't kill people usually. So for a moment, he kind of freaks out, and then he just runs out, because I think he knows that she called the police at that point. So he runs outside, and the other droogs are just kind of standing there waiting for him. And he's like, well, come on, let's get out of here. Let's go. And this is when you realize that they were setting him up the whole time here too. They were sick of his bullshit. So maybe he didn't really have the swagger to be the one to remain the elite of his group, and they smash him in the eyes with the milk. It takes him out, and he is taken off to the slammer. So I'm just curious, did you see this one coming like the first time? I don't know if you can harken back to the first time you saw this film. I didn't either. Looking at it back now, maybe it's because we're wrestling fans and we've learned to see the little seeds planted. Looking back now, yes, of course, they planted the seeds for this all along in the various other scenes in the movie. So it almost now looks obvious that they were going to turn on him.
Yeah. I remember seeing it when I was a teenager, and I got bummed out and disappointed, like, oh, all the fun's over and that these guys ruined it. But yeah, especially coming from a wrestling angle, it's obvious that this had to happen. And basically, he sneaks up without them, does his thing, murders a woman, comes out all jolly and all right, let's go, and crash. The milk goes right in his face. And this is the first time where you hear Alex, I believe he's like almost screaming in pain as this is supposed to burn his eyes. Of course, the glass broke over his head. He can't see. And this is the first time, other than the slight vibe where he looks like he was going to get molested, where it's like clearly now he's the victim. He's hurt. He's crying. He's upset. And you can hear the cops coming because, again, as Mark said, once they did this line through the door of, hey, we broke down outside. I need help. I'm by myself. She knew that had been said at the other couple's house because of the news reports. She calls the cops. They were already on the way, little to his knowledge.
Yeah, and then I feel like this is, I'm going to look through all this in pro wrestling terms now. This was like Shawn Michaels getting, and he's like Marty Jannetty at this point. He's getting thrown through the glass. This is where you do start to get some more sympathy built up for Alex. He gets turned on, he gets the glass smashed in his face, and then they continue this with the interrogators. And this does remind me of pro wrestling, like especially if you do have a big heel character that might get turned on, or they want to turn into a baby face, they'll build up more sympathy for him by having more bad shit happen to him. So I think they do that with Alex here by first having his droogs turn on him, but then just the horrific treatment that he is given by these interrogators. Yeah, of course. Now, in fairness, they're humans and they're pissed. They just think that they would truly, which did happen, that they just murdered this woman. So they're sort of taking it out on him too for being a degenerate and a piece of shit. But they treat him a certain way, and then this correction officer, the same one we saw like molesting him earlier, comes in and he's almost gleeful about the situation. He's like gleeful they're finally he's gleeful that Alex killed somebody, because he's like, good, now they're just gonna put you away. So it's great, but it really makes you think, like, this is not really a good guy here. Like, this guy's happy over the death of someone just because it means you get to put this, this brat kid away. And to top that, and this is the same guy we saw like try to grab his dick in the previous scene. And then after all this, worse, they say, look, you can go take a shot, punch him in the face, do whatever you want. We won't, we got your back. He doesn't do any of that. He just spits in Alex's face. And Alex looks more hurt by that than he ever could have by, that he didn't even seem to care about the fact that he was getting the shit beat out of him before. But he did look particularly affected by the spitting right in his eyes. So they really do a lot, I think, over these couple scenes to try to make Alex, he can never be a character that we look at as some kind of angel, but they do try to add, he does a lot to bring some kind of sympathy to Alex.
And just that it's already built in for the viewer that this gross old man is somewhat of a child molester of sorts. And to see him now reappear, and it's like, oh, it's that guy again. And the twinkle in his eye was a bit odd, the spitting. And it's almost like he's just he's kind of a disgusting degenerate himself.
Yes.
And he just got authority here.
He's just the Simpsons version of what about what Alex does in the unapproved way, but he does it through his own position of power in an approved way.
If there were an Epstein plane back then, it seems like that guy could have been on the plane. Yes. Let's put it that way.
Sure. This is when we learn that Alex gets sentenced to 14 years. And this is really when we get into the core of the movie. There's one scene, this has really nothing to do with anything, but when Alex is checking in to the jail and they're checking all his items, I thought this was a scene out of Austin Powers. This is cracking me up so much. There was nothing funny about the scene, but I realized, I think the scene from Austin Powers, you know what I'm talking about, where Austin is checking all his stuff and he checks a penis enlarger remover and he's like, that's not mine. Then there's a book like penis enlargers and me, and it just reminded me of that. So I do think they got that is a parody from this movie, because it was cracking me up. Not because the scene itself is really all that. It's kind of funny. He has like a half a candy bar and they check in the half a candy bar. But I'm just picturing Austin Powers the whole time. So just a little sidebar on that. He also gets an anal inspection, which they do in Austin. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that entire scene is from Austin Powers now parodied all that, because they do the same thing in Austin Powers through the progression. He then goes to the anal inspection and all this stuff, all the same stuff that Alex goes through. And then it seems Alex maybe finds Jesus perhaps a little bit in his own special way. So first he attends this, they show this kind of Catholic preach giving a speech, and Alex is there, and you almost think for a minute he starts talking about as the narrator. And I think another reason that so much sympathy is built for Alex throughout is he is a trustworthy narrator. He's not dishonest at all. He's always very forward and honest about his motivations. And so it doesn't seem like Alex thinks anything is wrong with what he's doing at all, ever. And even, I think, we discussed this earlier, whenever you hear the classical music kicking in during those scenes of violence, I think that is supposed to be through Alex's point of view. The music gets in his head because this is beautiful to him. What he's doing is beautiful. So as with any good villain, I guess Alex is not. I mean, this is a very complicated character that I don't think you can call a hero or a villain. He's the hero and the villain of his own movie in many ways. But every character sees themselves as the hero, and I don't think at any point Alex sees himself as anything but good and trying to fight through this system.
Yeah, and it's a crazy aspect of what he's doing, similar to, say, the Joker in that first Batman movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicklaus, where the Joker is like kind of dancing about in this crazy artsy outfits while he's kicking people, then blasting people, and there's this music playing, and he thinks everything's beautiful, but yet you see how twisted and sick he actually is. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that.
Very much
And,
so.
Yeah. He's got this Bible study going on, and it alludes to like, well, he's getting better. And there was always this underlying, like, is he faking these people or is he actually getting better? And then he goes to this thing where apparently there's a voluntary experimental treatment. And so this is where I started thinking, okay, he's not better, but he just wants to get the hell out of here. So he's kind of playing the game, if you will.
Well, I think right before that too is where we kind of get a glimpse that he's not necessarily better. I think it's right before this, at least in my notes, because he's sort of talking about his his learning how he's reading the Bible and learning all the stories, and it almost he does a scene where he envisions the scene of Jesus being whipped, and he's saying how inspired he was and he felt like he was there. And then you realize the camera pans over and you realize he's envisioning himself as a Roman soldier whipping Jesus. Right. And he's like, I can envision myself there being such a beautiful part of it. Yes. Again, showing this is how he views the world. This is how he views right and wrong. I mean, he sees this violence against Jesus as a beautiful thing, which again, not something I would have noticed a few years ago, but I think this really ties back to some of the symbology earlier when we saw the naked Jesus statues, the snake, etc.
Yes, that's a good. I actually skipped that. I had that written down. This bizarre. Of course, he likes the Roman aspect of these rituals and things like that. Then you're like, wait, what? Again, that it's the strange back and forth, like a paradox, if you will. That you're like, is this guy good? I kind of feel bad for him. Okay, no, that's sick, you know?
Right. They really take you on an up and down where every time you start to gain a little sympathy for him, they take you in some other direction where you're like, no, this guy's horrible. How could you possibly feel sympathy for him? But they effectively do this throughout the whole movie.
Yes. Yeah, quite well. Especially during this treatment that he's about to undergo, because then, especially now, I don't know how this would have been viewed in 71 or whatever, but now it just looks like an MK Ultra program that he's going through. Mm-hmm. And those of us, certainly the people that listen to your show, see this as that is the bad guys. And now Alex certainly is the victim, although, and then you start to think, well, did that stuff in the milk get him to act like he acted? Now the MK Ultra people have a victim to put into their program. So I started thinking these things.
Right. I start thinking in loops like, we just see them taking this bad person and taking him out of society to put him in the program. But is this more of a circle? Are they first dosing people with this milk and getting them hooked on milk to turn them into these degenerates to then bring them into the program? You know, is he much of a victim of this from the beginning? Is the question.
Yep. And of course it can look like, oh, we're the good guys. Look, this treatment we gave this sick, degenerate youth, he's better now. We are the good people, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, problem, reaction, solution. But then in the meantime, what you see all around, as I've said a few times, it's not like you see Alex and his droogs as degenerate, but they don't actually stand out in their society. They almost just seem like the natural progression of what we see everywhere else in the society. Again, like I said, even in the houses of the really rich people, you see these weird giant penis statues. You see these sort of satanic sexual imagery everywhere. You see these people furniture weird sculptures, and that are even like, are these supposed to be dead people that we're sitting on? So it's a very dark society, you know. And even the violence, to the point that the violence of Alex doesn't really seem to stand out as much as it does to fit into the society.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost, it's just like the natural conclusion of where everything else is going. Of course, it's going to drive these younger, more violent type men to just take this crazy sexual deprivation a step further and do the rape aspect of it.
Exactly. And so then, as you were saying, he goes and finds out about this voluntary program to try to get out of jail in a fortnight, I think they say, and goes to the Catholic minister to try to get into the program. Yeah. And he does get into the program, and then we see Alex. This is where we see pretty much the most famous part of this movie, that the iconic scenes where we don't need to go through every little aspect of it, but the biggest crux of it is that Alex is put in these chairs and he has his eyes held open, and there's constantly someone, putting water drops in his eyes, but they position him in such a way that he can never avert his eyes from what he's seeing on screen. And at first he thinks it's pretty cool. It's like a movie, and it's a violent movie, but he says it felt so real, and it's like the kind of stuff he really likes.
Yeah. And there were scenes like his guys attacking the other group.
Guys that it's not. It wasn't. Yeah, they may as well be his guys. They're dressed in weird, similar outfits, doing similar sorts of rapes and activities. And then it makes you wonder, yeah, obviously this is like propaganda footage they made. I'm not saying that it's supposed to be real footage of other rapes, but it makes you think, if this is the kind of stuff they know is going on out there, like how much is all of this part of the larger picture of the kind of things that they pull the strings on? Do they pull the strings at both ends?
Yeah, and I believe they start playing, of course, Beethoven.
Beethoven's Ninth. Yep.
Yeah, which is yeah.
Yeah, so that is the fucked up part of, I mean, there's a lot of fucked up parts of this, but from Alex's perspective, that's the fucked up part of this, because at first he's enjoying it, but then this does become a form of torture where he's subjected to this for hours upon hours of time, and then it becomes sexual imagery, it becomes rape, it becomes every image of violence, to the point that they basically reprogram Alex to get sick, to get physically ill at any thought of sex or violence or any of these degenerate activities that he got involved in his old life. So they do present Alex, and if there's anything you want to, I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm not getting as detailed on a lot of this stuff, but if there's anything in here that you want to dive in on more, you can.
Just from that part where he's getting physically ill, and they actually demonstrate it, because they get him on stage and do these realistic scenes in front of him, and he starts puking. If you could look at it through an Orthodox lens, it's everything they were showing him was bad for his soul, and so he's getting spiritually sick by seeing these things as well. That's one thought I had now looking at this.
Interesting way to look at it. Yeah. So. But basically, they do this demonstration, as you said, where they're showing him off, like, look what we did, and they have this guy that's trying to get him angry, and then they show him like a beautiful woman, and yeah, it just makes him sick. Every time he tries to start fantasizing about raping the woman, but he can't. He gets him sick. So they declare, yeah, he's good to go. And instead of coming up with some plan, they just release him out into the wild. So he at first just goes where any kid, I guess, go. He goes home, and this is where he finds. First, he sees his bed isn't made, so he's a little dismayed by that. He's like, "What's going on? My bed's I've been gone for months. My bed's not made." And he finds out this guy is living there, and it does seem that the mom is sort of like holding him by the arm, and it seems that it's implied that they have made some kind of contract. It's not very clear, but they say, no, he lives here now. We have a contract with him. We can't just kick him out. And there's like you said, it seems that this guy is basically brought in to be their new son and also be a sex toy for his mom.
Yes, it appears that way. Just to rewind a quick second, I wrote something down that I found interesting now as an Orthodox Christian, of course. The priest comes up before he's released and says, like, he's good. We've killed his free will, which of course is what Christ gave humans.
Interesting.
And so I thought that was an interesting Christian twist on it, that they've now killed his free will by showing him all of these horrific things. And it made me think, like, imagine society now with the internet and AI and all these gross things. We still have free will, but if you're a slave to a lot of this stuff, in a sense, they have killed your free will. So anyway, that's
interesting. Well, on to that end, one of the things that he finds out when he goes back to his home is not only his stuff is gone, but he says, "What happened to Basil? What happened to the snake?" And he's told that the snake is no longer with us. So I wonder how much that, I mean, because depending on your interpretation, the snake could be almost the opposite end of that, representing the ultimate pursuit of will, where will is the only important thing to your life, and inserting your will is, and that is kind of what Alex was before, where his whole life was just, it was do as thou wilt. I mean, it was Crowley. It was do whatever feels good. So that's now gone from him too. So maybe his free will, maybe the good side has been gone, but it's all gone. You lose your will, you lose the will to do good, and you lose the will to do evil.
Yes. I thought, and it was interesting that the priest is the one who said, came up and said, well, we've killed his free will. He's good.
Right.
And he comes home. Yeah, we see he's been replaced. And I'll let you take it from there. So you can lead us, great interviewer. Yeah,
well, I really thought too, this is where they continue to build sympathy for Alex. Because even here, you start to feel bad for him, because he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have my and his parents are just like kicking him out because this guy is living in the house to boink his mom. But I did find it funny in this scene too, where you can tell this guy starts talking shit to Alex. Like, I know what you did. Like, I know all that stuff you did. And Alex, you can tell he wants to just kill the guy, but he gets sick again. So he's like, oh man. But in that moment, you find yourself rooting for, you kind of want the bad Alex to come out now, because now he's like your guy at this point in the film. He's your scumbag, you could say. So especially when they present you with this other douchebag who's just boinking his mom, and is just like the most dislikeful character. It's impossible to like this guy. So you really do want Alex to bring the violence back, and then it's almost like, as Alex gets that sick to his stomach, we're like, damn it, he's not gonna come back. So in the course of this film, they really, Stanley Kubrick, I keep saying they, I mean, it's almost all Stanley Kubrick. He wrote and directed this film. It really do bring you on quite a journey through Alex's character, and seeing him from every aspect. The interesting thing is he doesn't really change his character the whole time. It's really just we see the various aspects of his character from different vantage points.
And now we're still thinking, is he fixed then because he wanted to beat this guy,
right?
And he gets sick,
right?
Well, so there's still this haunting feeling, like, okay, is he cured? What's going on with him? Is this a play for everyone, on everyone from his perspective, just so he could be free again? And at some point here, he runs into some people that he knows.
Yeah, so this is like this is your life now. This last portion of the movie, he's all distraught, doesn't know where to go, so he's just wandering around, comes upon that same homeless guy, and this homeless guy starts asking him for change, and he doesn't want to. Again, he wants to just beat him up or something, but he starts to feel sick again, so he starts to reach for change. But then the homeless guy recognizes him, and he's like, I never forget a face. Starts chasing after him, and this guy and these other homeless guys join in. They're all chasing after him, and Alex can't even fight back because as he gets the desire for violence to defend himself, he gets sick and just kind of collapses to the ground. So it's a bad time for Alex, and things get even worse because the cops come due to this whole scene. And who are the cops now? The fucking droogs. The same droogs that turned on him are now the cops. So it's like, oh my God, which makes me think too. I mean, they say, oh yeah, we got cleaned up and now we're good guys now. We're part of the cops. But that seems like a pretty quick turnaround to go from being street punks to becoming officers on the street. And I kind of wonder, I wonder if these guys were his handlers all the time. If they were always the feds, so to speak, if they were always the guys that were supposed to incite Alex into violence, I wonder that because it seems awfully convenient that just months later because he was only there for a fortnight, they said. So you're telling me 40 days later, these guys are cops?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting way. See, I hadn't caught the time period. I looked at it as their proclivity towards violence drew them into being cops. And so that's what I thought. That
makes sense too. Yeah, but I was thinking that
long enough time, I suppose, unless they just quickly said, well, our leader's gone, we need a job.
And maybe in this future, it's not that hard to become a cop, Maybe it's just a quick 30. All right, maybe they were thankful for them turning in Alex or what have you, or whatever it may be. I guess there's a lot of interpretations, but either way, things are just getting worse for him. And these guys take him to this most disgusting bathtub in the middle of the woods with the dirtiest, filthy water and just start beating him mercilessly, shoving his head in the water. So again, as bad as the character Alex has been, it's hard not to continue to feel sympathy for him as he goes through this is your life of meeting everyone he's kind of wronged along the way here. Eventually he wanders away from wanders into a random mansion, which is the mansion of the original old dude that Alex beat up. And old dude recognizes him. I think at first he gets carried in by this guy who I called Austin Powers with muscles in my notes. This guy cracked me up. He's like, I guess he's the guy that helps this guy out now this guy is crippled. He's in a wheelchair. And as we do find out, he takes Alex in, says, oh, this is great. You've turned things around. You can stay here. Lets Alex take a bath. There's this weird scene where Alex gets out and he wants him to drink the wine, and Alex, you think Alex thinks the wine is poisoned or something? Because
what made me think that,
which made me think that too. And then it seems like it's he keeps testing it, and he finally just drinks the wine. The guy just encourages him to drink more, and then you kind of forget about it for a minute. And these other guys come over because they're interested in learning more about Alex for some reason that we'll find out why. This is where it's revealed. Where it's very clear. I don't think it was clear that all of this was connected before, because we just see we see that when he gets violent or has sexual desires, he gets sick. But then we find out, he explains in this scene, no, but they did it with his song, Beethoven's Ninth, and now he can't even hear Beethoven's Ninth without getting sick. Well, Alex, that was a big mistake to reveal that, because this whole time, we find out this guy was using Alex for two things. One, he did want to get revenge, sick and twisted revenge upon him, because we find out his wife was raped by Alex, and the wife died later of pneumonia. The doctor said it was pneumonia. They said it was pneumonia, but I know what it was. I know it was because you raped her, basically. So to get back at Alex, they lock him in this room. and play just Beethoven's Ninth, knowing that it's going to drive him insane and make him sick, but knowing also that they want to use him for political reasons because they want to make the government look bad. So there's also like a false flag element to this too. So Alex jumps out of the window and tries to kill himself. There's even some headlines where they say that Alex kills himself, but I guess later we know that he really didn't die. But he's basically is like used as this. They attempt to use him as a political tool to show the program failing, but then he gets a visit in the hospital from this prime minister guy who essentially just says like, oh yeah, you're better now. You're the face of our new program. And we're almost led to believe like, Alex maybe really is cured now or something until, the very last scene. But I'll let you give your commentary before we get right there.
That's what I found fascinating. Yeah, he the whole time, I'm thinking it was this awkward tension at the dinner table. I think there's pasta being served and there's this wine, and you're like, okay, this guy's poisoned it.
Oh, and it was poisoned or something because later you forget about it. But I was going to say he does his flat face into the spaghetti.
Yeah, and then of course the torture of all things. Yeah, the Ninth Symphony, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and it says I've gotten my notes and I can't remember exactly, but the doctors and politicians are blamed for the suicide attempt, I believe. And then I remember he's in a scene in the hospital, and there's photographers, media, and all of this. And this guy comes in to thank him like he's some sort of hero. And then, I won't spoil the end part, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where and I think the ending is somewhat up for debate, I guess, to an extent. But I kind of took this as, yeah, the thing worked. The original brainwashing worked in the sense that it made him sick every time he had these desires to kill or what have you. My interpretation of this is that, of just from the material, sort of straightforward ending of the movie, is that he jumps out the window, he tries to kill himself because he's lost his mind from the music. And then I think when he hits his head, I think it fixed the brainwashing, is what I think.
Yes.
So he's playing along now. So now he comes to see this minister and he's acting like he's all good and what have you. And then what we see from this last scene where we kind of see this deranged look in his eyes. And then he just has a vision of, this is a pretty wild vision. He's just like, it's not rape, really. He's just getting fucked by this like woman, this naked woman on a beach and surrounded by these like official looking people that are all like clapping and approving of it. And that's like his fantasy. And that's the end of the movie. And it had been a while since I had seen this, probably like 10 years or so. I didn't remember that being the end of the movie, that exact shot. Right. So it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, oh, don't we go back to, and isn't there something else? But no, it ends right there. And you don't really know what goes on with Alex. So I've talked a lot in the last few minutes. I'll let you take it away. What do you think about the whole way they kind of wrap things up here?
So I've gone back and forth from thinking, okay, he wasn't cured at all. But like we've said throughout, he was physically ill, and if he wasn't cured at all, he would have probably assaulted the boy toy of the mom. You would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I think he originally was cured in their sense.
Yeah, so do I. So I've come at the end after seeing it many times to think he was cured, and at some point, I didn't know if it was the poisoned wine that screwed him up or the fall, like you said, but it's something in his head reverts back to how he was. Maybe their cures aren't as powerful as they wanted to tell society. But yeah, whatever the case, clearly at the end, it kind of makes you smile in a weird way. Like, right. Okay, their scary crap didn't work at all. Maybe it did work. Maybe it wore off. For whatever reason, in the end, it did not work.
And it's this interesting position to be in as the viewer, because again, even though Stanley Kubrick does a lot to build sympathy for Alex, he also does a lot to show you he is a bad character of the soul. There are very few redeeming qualities of Alex. Right. You never even see him be nice to even one of his guys. I mean, there's really no reason you don't see him do one thing that's good, except for when he goes to give the homeless guy change because he's been brainwashed and he can't resist it. And I think it's not like Alex ever changed. Alex never changed in the whole movie. They just did this thing where he got physically ill. So then he realized that I guess I have to play along and do this stuff or else I'm going to get sick. But I think the whole time the real Alex was always there. And It's kind of like that last shot, that scene, because if the brainwashing was still working, he wouldn't even be able to have that thought without getting sick, without getting violently ill. So he's back, and we don't know where that's going to go, but it's interesting too. They end the photo right before that. He's a photo op. Like the prime minister is taking pictures with him, and he's been turned around into like the victory of the government. Look what they can do. Yep. They can cure crime. All we got to do is put people into the system, which makes you think too, like Alex is just the first one. He's the commercial for this program now I guess all these criminals are going to go to. So now, and if it's like what we were discussing is a possibility before, that perhaps the droogs and all of this activity is created by the government in the first place through the milk, the MK or the Korova, whatever this is in this drug. If they're actively creating people to put them into this program, then clearly the entire purpose is just to turn society into a bunch of free will-less drones. And boy, Buck, does that tie into a lot of things you talk about on your show. Yeah,
it does. And in the end, like in real life, you can't kill free will. So he still has it, no matter what they did. That's not something that can be taken away from humans.
Which, despite what a despicable character he is portrayed as, is sort of an inspiring message in its own way.
Right. It's not, of course, it doesn't show his free will to help people. And through charity, it shows his depraved free will. But nonetheless, it is his free will. That's what he was driving on the entire movie until he gets caught, etc. And in the end, you cannot kill free will.
Yeah, and I think Kubrick does a brilliant job here of no matter your take on this character and where things are going, I challenge anyone to watch this movie and like not be smiling when you see Alex having this vision in the end, because as bad of a character it is, the system itself I think is portrayed as such a greater evil that even though we know Alex has done bad things, we know he's a piece of shit, we also see he's not some unique evil in this society. I think they show us enough to make it very clear that he is as much a product of the society as anything else. And if anything, all of these acts that he's done, all these terrible things he's done, are things that he's been sort of made to do by by this guy who molests, who knows. That probably wasn't the first guy that guy touched his dick, and that probably wasn't the first time that Alex himself has been the victim of some pretty nasty shit and been exposed to some really over sexualized wild stuff, because we see this stuff everywhere in the society. So I think when you look at it as Alex being a victim of the society, then it's hard not to just be cheering for him when you realize, all right, our boy is still in there. He's a bastard. He's a scumbag, but God damn it, he's our scumbag.
Yeah. And like you said, he doesn't change through the whole film. And for those listening, not watching, I'm doing like my pen in a plane, straight horizontal, but it's people around him. Some are worse than him. Some are better. Some are worse. And kind of how you view him in that moment is relative to how the people are around him. When you see the guy trying to molest him, all of a sudden he looks better than that person. When you see him raping a pretty lady, he's below that person, etc.
Interesting. Yeah. And Alex is he's like our constant. He's the metric that we can use to judge everybody else in our society. Yeah. Buck, any last thoughts on this film? And I'll let you dovetail from that into doing all of your plug and let everybody know where they can find your work at Counterflow and whatnot.
Well, I think it's a great film, despite the vulgarity and the crass nature of a lot of it, but I've liked it for a long time. I hope we enticed a person or two to see it. It's fascinating, especially if you like Kubrick. If you do, really, you've probably seen this already. And that's my final thought on that. Is for my show, counterflowpodcast.com. Anyone knows where to find podcasts. Mine is called Counterflow with Buck Johnson. You can go to the YouTube page, subscribe. And that's about all I got on that front.
Well, Buck, a pleasure as always, and it's been quite a journey watching the evolution of yourself and your show. So I want to encourage people, if you're a fan of this show, you are assuredly going to enjoy Counterflow and Buck Johnson. So I definitely want to encourage you to check that out. I also want to encourage you to check out the Smoke-Filled Room segment. That's where Buck and I are going right now. Buck, thanks for coming on the show. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Buck Johnson, breaking down the good old Clockwork Orange, one of the fine films of Stanley Kubrick. We will continue to return to the films of Kubrick throughout the lifetime of this podcast. There are quite a number of people that I have in mind to look at future films or past films. They already happened. Future episodes. You know what I'm saying, guys? Just play along with me, all right? Humor me, will ya? And this conversation, my friends, did continue, as it always does, in the smoke-filled room, where I spoke with Buck a little bit more about his thoughts on conspiracies, where his work on his podcast overlaps with conspiracy theory and conspiracy fact, got his thoughts on the UFO push, UFO propaganda, all this good stuff and more is available in the Smoke-Filled Room bonus segment, part of the premium edition, the full edition of this show. My friends, if you're only hearing the regular old version for the poors, my friends, you're missing out on 1/3 of this program. I hate to tell you, but I got to be the bearer of bad news. But the good news is there is a solution. Just subscribe to the old Mark Claire show, Premium, which you can do on Patreon, on Subscribestar, on Rockfin. You can support me on Rockfin, where you get access to all sorts of other creators as well, including past guests of the show, like Monica Perez, Jay Dyer, Sam Tripoli, Isaac Weishaupt, so on and so forth, Corny Turner, Monica Perez, the list goes on. I might have even already said her. The point is, great value over there if you support a bunch of creators. But if you just want to support this guy and you have various levels at which you can do so, you can check out the Patreon or the Subscribestar. I don't want you to have to remember all these links, so I'm just going to have you remember one. It's markclair.com. There is no K involved in this, my friends. Marc, M-A-R-C, Claire, C-L-A-I-R, markclair.com has every link you need for every platform the show is on, for every way you can support the show. To join the Telegram group, we have a blast in the Telegram group that is completely free to join. You do not need to support me financially in any way, shape, or form to join the Telegram group and join in the fun. You just got to track down the link at markclair.com. That's all. That's the price of admission. My friends, it's been fun until next week. In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.